Welcome to part 2 of Doom and Logic. In the first part we considered what would happen with regards to unemployment. And in this part we'll continue to ask the question, who would collapse first in New Zealand, the business sector, the banks or the government? And what we're going to do now is take a quick look at what happens with the banking fraternity. So the first thing I want to point out is that new borrowing last year at November 2019 was about $6.7 billion, and in February of 2020 this lowered down to $5.6 billion. The total borrowing that occurs in New Zealand, this is private not government debt, you can see here highlighted in the yellow figures, and it's $296 billion for housing and personal consumer loans. Then we have business loans at $121 billion, and then we have agricultural loans at $62 billion, making a total of $481 billion. The question we need to ask is how many people help to carry this debt? And that's a hard figure to find, but what we can think about is debt is usually serviced by people who are employed, not the unemployed. And what is expected is a spike in individual bankruptcies. In other words, if people become unemployed, there is likely to be a spike in individual bankruptcies, and this will affect the bank. So if we remember the employment figures we had in the first part, there was a total in excess of 400 to 500,000 people that will end up unemployed, and that's up from 103,000. We can also expect company insolvencies to be in excess of 50,000 because of this. And it's because most of the credit is backed by personal guarantees, and in most cases it's even linked back to the people's houses, their own assets. So we can expect individual bankruptcies to exceed 100,000, and possibly go as high as 200,000. And if we add to this a migratory outflow of 150,000 people, then you can expect to see mortgage covenant defaults to exceed 60,000. If you're wondering why I think immigration will reverse, it's because a lot of the people here are only here for economic reasons and don't have any long-term roots planted. And of course there's a number of people that also fit the migrant student and work visa category. So as those people leave and we have a few New Zealanders come back, I still think we're going to have somewhere in the region of 100 to 150,000 people less in New Zealand, and that's 30,000 households or more less required. And therefore we'll need less housing, and new housing will come to a standstill. So the conclusion here is that the banks are at risk of some major problems. But will the government be in even more trouble sooner than the banks? So the real question is, who's going to be in more trouble quicker, the banks or the government? To answer this question, we need to go back with this new information and take another look at what the government will be doing in the midst of this. So please go to part 3 of Doom and Logic.